I want to talk about saying no sometimes. With every yes that you give, you're saying no to something else because you only have 160 hours in a week, right? And so, with what you're doing online, if you're just uploading everything to your website or to YouTube, you're really just you're giving everybody unlimited access. And is there any reason why you need to maybe put up some walls and some commitments and think about what are you actually trying to do? And I bring this up because with your digital strategy, having some friction, having some scarcity where they have to make a commitment, do this or do that is a good thing. And I think it's something that's biblical. And I also think it's something that will help you accomplish your digital goals or your organization's goals and vice versa. And so I want to start off by looking at two pieces of scripture. Probably not a terrible place to start. One is Matthew 7:13 through 14, and it says, you could enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad. I mean, it's literally a big gate versus a narrow gate. And the gate is wide for the many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever will find it. I'm not going to get into the theology here, but ultimately, what we do know is that very few will actually choose to make a decision to put Jesus first in their life. Some of you might go, well, I don't believe it's a choice. I'm going to disagree with you. I think it is a choice. You can argue with me in the comments, and I will ignore those comments. But ultimately, Jesus doesn't just want people to be forced to love him. He wants people to choose. And so this is what life is. It's a practice. It's supposed to see, do you really love God? And are you willing to make that sacrifice and choose him? And so for whatever reason, that's how God has wired this world. And so there's a narrow decision. And it even goes on in Revelations 21:27 at the end of the Bible. It says, nothing evil or ceremonially unclean will be allowed to enter, nor anyone who practices shameful idolatry or dishonesty, but those whose names are written except for those whose names are written in the book of life. And the idea, how do you get into the book of life? All we know is that you have to put Jesus first in your life. And so there's literally a narrow gate. And Jesus he plays this, God plays the scarcity that in order to do this, you have to make this commitment. To get into eternity with God, you have to make a commitment to put Jesus first in your life on this side of eternity. And so literally Jesus has and God has this line. You might say it's like a paywall. It doesn't cost you anything outside of you just saying yes and sacrificing and saying, I'm going to put him first and I'm going to work towards this. But Jesus plays the scarcity line. And I think this is something I bring this up, and I know like we're talking about some digital strategy and this doesn't perfectly relate, but I think it's important to understand by saying yes to one thing, you might get more views or whatever, but by putting behind a commitment, you're going to get less people, but maybe that's better. And the point here is, Jesus with salvation, he wants people that actually want to spend eternity with him. When people ask me, what is hell, is literally, it's a place without God. And why would God bring you into eternity with him if you didn't want to spend eternity with him? And that's ultimately what hell is. It's just a place where God isn't. And that's where, you've chosen to go. And I think with digital, it's important for us to understand that by saying no sometimes, yes, you're going to get less people, but maybe those are more vetted people. Those are people that actually want to be there and want to engage. And so with digital advertising, there's actually two big approaches. And obviously there's subsets here, but one big one is canvassing. Canvassing, I call it the Coca-Cola strategy, where they just kind of put anything online. And the idea is that you just know Coca-Cola, and you know where to get a Coke. They don't really have to think a lot about the assimilation because they're so big and their budgets are big. So like their ads aren't very targeted. They're just kind of, be happy or be cool or whatever and just go get a Coke. They don't have to tell you where to get a Coke. Literally, it's just go get a Coke and you know where to go. I always think of there was a great ad that made me laugh from Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. Will Arnett, I think is his name, was the voice, and he literally at the end of the ad he goes,
Good thing they're sold literally everywhere business is done. I'm pretty sure you could buy them at a bank.
so funny because it was true. That's Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are everywhere. They don't really have to think about like go to Target or go here, go to this URL. It's just like a canvas. It's boom. It's just there it is. And then there's another type of approach, which is more a niche thing, where they're going to be smaller organizations with less budgets and more targeted kind of approaches. You might use something like a lookalike audience on Facebook and maybe a special paid promotion I was watching a documentary this past week on the history of Afghanistan, which I don't know why, but I was. And this YouTuber that I was watching, essentially midway through the deal, there was a paid promotion to go, hey, do you like this content that I'm giving you? You might really like paying for Curiosity Stream, which is a documentary kind of Netflix style thing. Not that expensive. It's like $20 a year. I actually looked at it. I was kind of interested in it. I've heard it about it. There's a couple other people I follow that promote it too, but they're being very targeted because they're not Coca-Cola. And so they're being very niche. So they're being very focused. And I bring this up because I think sometimes the way ministries, churches think about their content, they go, oh, just give away everything free, put everything up, which again, for weekend services, that's fine. And I think it's a good approach. But with some of your other stuff, you need to think about more niche approaches and don't get so wrapped up in how many people view it or how many people are downloading it. Think about how many people are actually moving through your process. So you can kind of have two approaches as a ministry. You could give everything away free. There's no login or nothing, no commitment, and it's kind of like a Napster or like a LimeWire type of approach. It's just there it is. But at the same time, there's an approach to put it behind some kind of commitment. Maybe they have to join your church, or maybe they have to sign up to join your community. Maybe they have to, you have to know that they're baptized or whatever it is. And you put some stuff, you make a conscious decision to put some stuff kind of publicly accessible, and you make other stuff behind some kind of login or so forth. And you can even have tiers of that. For example, if somebody is hosting like a house church network with you, maybe you allow them to download your content, but everybody else you don't, because you don't want them to sell it or whatever. But maybe somebody is part of a house church network. There's a little bit more of a commitment, and yeah, they get special access. I think of it like a Disney Plus, where you can see the movie in theaters, or you can pay $30. A couple weeks ago, Black Widow came out on Disney Plus, and I actually paid the $30 because I had my boys with me. I think my wife was gone with our daughter, and I was like, oh, this would be fun. And I was like, oh, this is actually not. I'm probably spending the same amount of money as if we just went to the theaters, and it was a really cool experience. Even though my kids really like Space Jam over that movie, which I'm still a little disappointed in them, but that's my parenting. But ultimately, or I could have waited, right? I could have waited another 3 to 4 months, and it would have just came to Disney Plus for free. And so Disney is thinking about this strategy, and they're trying to drive this because they know that this experience in the theaters is valuable, but they know some of those people will never go. And so they have like this process. Another example is Chipotle. They had this when they first launched their kind of relaunched their app. They experimented with this concept of they had a quesadilla that was essentially just a burrito. Obviously, it's not that magical, but if you wanted the quesadilla, you had to use their app, and it was very, very targeted. And I remember I tried it. I actually wanted to try it because I'm always curious in digital strategy like that. It was good. Pretty much a burrito, but with some extra cheese. But the idea is that you couldn't walk into the store and get the quesadilla. You had to use their app. And they were doing that to drive engagement on their app, which is very strategic. And obviously they were selling less quesadillas. But it was in the long-term strategy of getting better app engagement, it was a win. And so less views or less sales for the deeper engagement, which is use the app. And I bet a lot of people set up their app, set up favorite orders, and are going to use them more frequently because of that. And then lastly, another example is Disneyland, just the actual physical stores. And you see this is happening a lot in kind of the amusement park industry, but Disneyland sees this, that they have these experiences with Marvel and Star Wars where you can go to their their physical parts, and you can get a lightsaber from Star Wars Land, or the most recent example is the new Marvel Land. I know I was there like a week before it opened, but I remember going to Disneyland and they had the Spider-Man ride, and you could actually buy like this web slinger thing, which I've heard stories. It's kind of like a Toy Story, but it's more like you do it, with your motions of your hands. But you could buy this thing, and it makes the experience better, and it's only for those who come to the park. And so they're literally seeing like, you could watch the movies, very little friction. You can show up to the park, and then you can ultimately buy this thing, and you're deeply, and they're seeing this. So they're not selling, obviously, millions of these things. They're selling a very small select, but it's driving better engagement, deeper engagement, very loyal engagement. And so I bring this up because ultimately you have to figure out what your organization, your ministry is about, and you got to think about where do you need to use scarcity in your approach. And I do want to make the argument that I think you need some scarcity. I think if you put everything up for free with no acts, with no limitation, it's not really going to mean much. The same way is that if our decision for Jesus was just given to us, it wouldn't mean anything. We have to make a conscious choice to put Jesus first in our life. And again, if we were not to make that choice, it wouldn't really even be a choice. It would just be something given to us. And so think about this. So, for example, a local church, you might stream your services. You might, give different things away for free. But ultimately, the scarcity is, you know what? If you come in person, you get this physical thing like a bag we're going to give you, but we're not going to ship that to you. Baptism is a great example. We're not going to facilitate baptism remotely, but if you come here, we're going to make this a special experience. There's some friction to attending, and so you might still give them something online, but it's a little bit different. And the idea is you're doing that because you are a local church that is online, but you're primarily rooted in a local church experience. And so you're still going to engage people digitally, but ultimately you're going to have some friction. And then you also have like a church anywhere approach where maybe you are trying to decentralize your church. And so, for example, the scarcity approach would be, you know what? If you want access to our group material, or if you want to join our church, ultimately you got to sign up and commit. And so, yes, we'll give you free access to our like Netflix church material, but you need to actually join our church and make a commitment. And the idea is that you'll get access to even more things, but you make them either become a member, or maybe you have something that it's called like the online community commitment, whatever you want to call it, but you give some different access. And really the idea here is the exercise that I want to encourage you to do is to draw out your church's paradigm, your funnel, your assimilation, whatever it is, from come and see, come and die, really broad gate to narrow gate, and draw a red line. When do you want them to have some kind of pushback? And so, when do you want to put some geo restriction? So for a local church, that might be they have to show up in person. Or maybe it's for maybe a fully decentralized digital only church. That might be when you actually have to start a physical group in your city. And so again, depending on what you're trying to bring about, I think scarcity is a really good thing. It's a really good thing to have some pushback and to say, hey, if you want this, you got to show up here. You got to do this. And so you do this too to drive deep engagement. Remember, I don't want you just to get wrapped up in how many views you can get on your Facebook stream or your YouTube videos. I want you to think about how many people are actually moving through your process. And so draw out your church's approach. Think about the red line. When does a commitment need to be facilitated? And then think about that. And so the next time you have a conversation, oh, should we just give this away? Think about like, okay, you know what? Should we get something back in return, like an email address or something they sign or something else? For us, for example, my church, we do this around membership where you have to attend this 2-hour class and you have to sign a commitment. And when you sign that commitment and you join our church, you get different access to me, to our community, to resources. Now, you might not have membership at your church, but it is something that you could facilitate by calling it something else or do something. But think about scarcity and think about saying no at some point in your church's digital strategy. So thanks again for watching. In our next and one of our last videos, and I'm going to be doing some more in this series of kind of digital church, we're going to talk about like a sci-fi paradise and what the future has for us and what that's going to look like. So thanks again. Please like and subscribe. Drop any comments. I'm going to be doing a Q&A here coming soon, so I would love to see and hear any of your questions. So leave that below. But thanks again.